What if someone decided you weren't allowed to know how magic works, and the world you live in was built specifically to make sure you never thought to ask why? But if you found out anyway, they would take that knowledge back from you. That's not a plot twist in Witch Hat Atelier, that's the foundation. What's good, Magical Pointed Hat and Pin Crew? It is your girl Mel with Mel Otaku Talk, and I am back with another manga. Today we will be diving into Witch Hat Atelier chapters 1 and 2, with the anime adaptation dropping on April 6th. We're getting ahead of it, and trust me, reading this manga before the anime is going to be a fantastical, wondrous journey. We've got Coco, Keyfree, and by the end of chapter 2, we'll have Agat, Tedia, and Richie. And every single one of them is going to matter. So buckle up and let's jump in. Let's start with these two chapters and what they're really about underneath everything else. Because Witch Hat Atelier is not primarily a story about a girl who wants to use magic. It's a story about a world where, to end a war, the truth that anyone can use magic was deliberately erased from memory and replaced with the belief that only a chosen few are born with it. Here's what the manga reveals. Magic in this world isn't genetic. It isn't a gift you're born with. It's an art or craft. Let me explain. Anyone with the right knowledge, the right ink, and the right drawing skill can cast a spell. The reason ordinary people believe magic is innate, the reason Coco spent her entire childhood believing she simply wasn't born with it, is because a group of witches, or as we know it tends to be in these stories, be a society of witches, generations ago, erased the truth from the world's memory on purpose. They called it the Pact. And according to Keyfree's account of how he knows it and how he learned it, the justification was real. The age before the Pact was a world at war, and magic was the weapon. In his telling, the decision to suppress that knowledge ended the conflict. Now, the mangaka isn't setting up a simple villain here. The Pact, at least as Keyfree tells it, brought peace. But here's what makes this so rich as a setup. So stay with me on this. The cost of that peace was paid by people who never agreed to pay it. People like Coco, who grew up being told she was just a simple girl, likely not powerful enough, not born right, not meant for the world she loved most, or she couldn't participate in that. The lie wasn't just political, it was personal, and it shaped how she saw herself, not a part of the magical world. That's the ethical core that the mangaka is laying out in chapters 1 and 2. Not magic bad or magic rules bad, but something much harder. What do we owe people who were harmed by a decision that also protected them? That question is already embedded in the foundation of the story, and we're only 2 chapters into it. Now, let's talk about our girl Coco, because the manga does something smart with her that's easy to miss on a first read. Coco is introduced as a dreamer. She's chasing sheets in the wind, pretending they're a cloak of flight. She makes her mother promise to stop talking about how she wishes she could use magic. On the surface, she looks like the classic protagonist who wants something she can never have. But watch what she actually does the moment the door cracks open when she realizes Keyfree is casting in her mother's workshop. She doesn't wait to be invited. She basically climbs on top of the roof. When the boys give up because the curtains are shut, she stays. When she discovers how magic actually works, she doesn't marvel from a safe distance. She immediately starts experimenting, fails, adjusts, experiments again, and develops her own technique. Within one night, tracing the book wasn't a mistake born from ignorance. It was innovation. It was her innovation. She hit a limitation and she engineered around it. The spell that Coco was tracing was from a forbidden book. As she traced that spell with the special ink that came along with the book, she was casting. Again, at the same time she was turning the cast itself, the spell that she was tracing, And in this story, they don't cast by speaking a spell, they cast by tracing spell designs or drawings that act as casting. And little did she know, you could call this a dark spell that she was tracing, which means it was casting at the same time, all while it was turning her Hamlet into stone. Luckily, Kefri made it to her in time and pulled her through the window, but it wasn't luck for her mother. Her mother was standing in the door front calling out for Coco as her mother, was being turned to stone. Kefri got to Coco in time and was floating with her in the sky as Coco was watching her Hamlet and her mother become petrified. And from this day forward, this changed Coco's life going forward in this story. And this is where it gets interesting. The mangaka is telling us something specific here. Coco was never passive. She was just living in a world that gave her nothing to push against. The moment the door opens even slightly, she kicks it off the hinges. And that's what makes the catastrophe of her mother's petrification so devastating and so narratively precise. It is completely, entirely in character. Of course, she traced one more page. And of course, she couldn't stop. The tragedy isn't that Coco made a stupid mistake, it's that she made a Coco mistake. Her greatest strength and her worst moment are the exact same thing. That's what I like to call good writing. By chapter 2, Coco has dropped into Kefri's atelier, or she now had to be taken in by Kefri. And the mangaka immediately populates it with 3 characters who are going to define her day to day experience going forward. If you want to understand why Coco had to end up at Kefri's atelier, let me explain. The rules of the pact are clear. Anyone who discovers the truth of how magic works has their memory erased. That was supposed to be Coco's fate from the moment Kefri realized what she had seen. But Coco did something in that moment that changed everything. She kind of bargained. And of course, Kefri kind of bargained back with her too. She knew the picture book. She could identify it. And Kefri, who already had a theory about who created that book, needed that lead more than he needed her memory wiped. So one of the things in the beginning of chapter 1, when Coco was in her mother's shop cutting the cloth that Kefri needed, he realized how much she loved magic, and she told him a story about when she was a child and she attended the festival, and she bought this picture book about magic off of a man, and that in itself caught Kefri's attention. So this is how we get to the picture book portion of her. Made her a witch because he is going to need her to identify the book that she purchased when she was a younger girl off this person, this anonymous person during the festival that was in the streets. When Coco arrives at the atelier, she doesn't walk into an empty room. She walks into a world that already has its own dynamics, its own activities and events, and its own opinions about her. And the 3 people she meets first are going to define what her daily activities will look like going forward, like I mentioned. Let me introduce them. First, Coco meets Tidia or Tedia, and she is warm and immediately welcome. She jumps in without hesitation to show Coco how things work, and her energy makes the atelier feel approachable. Coco is then introduced to Richie, and she is measured and pragmatic, not unfriendly, just watching. She offers Coco some practical guidance without fanfare and keeps her own counsel. And then we have Agat. God's entrance at the end of chapter 2 is what I call a tad bit jarring, and it should be because Agat isn't wrong. She has worked for everything she has. Years of practice, ink-stained hand she wears as a badge of honor. Test pass, waiting done. And then Coco walks in through a door no one else was allowed to use, with one accidental spell to her name, and is handed the apprenticeship Agat worked for years. Is this resentment at this point? It's hard to tell, but is a god going to demand or require that Coco proves herself? Absolutely. Is it cruelty? Nope. It's about Coco having to prove herself, and a god is going to hold her to that. I actually love a god's personality. And her challenge is, like I said, Coco is going to have to prove herself on her test, which at the end of chapter 2 is planned for the next day. Now, let me point out what I want you to notice here, that the mangaka is constructing what the mangaka is constructing is different relationships, different personalities that Coco will likely have with the three different girls. In some cases, when we're talking about four individuals, especially girls in under the same roof, the dynamics can go either way. You will likely have one person that's extremely nice, one who will always guide and teach, and then you will have one that, you know, the girls, one girl may tend to bump heads with. But this is great because the mangaka is showing us the different personalities and the personalities that Coco will bump up against. And let's not forget Keyfree. He's warm and genuinely invested in Coco. But the phone call reveals something important, that he had to get approval for someone to take her in as a witch. There's a structure above him and he answers to it. Now, what does that hierarchy look like? You'll have to stay tuned as we go through the other chapters. That is often revealed in these types of stories, which is magical structures. You will definitely find out who the hierarchy is and how it operates. And here's where I now give my final thoughts, and I like to add a little bit of theory into it. So let's get into what I think Shirahama, who is the mangaka, is actually setting up, because these two chapters are doing a lot of deliberate seeding. The masked witch at the festival, the one who sold young Coco a picture book about magic and threw in a pen for free, is not a throwaway character. Keyfree's reaction when Coco describes the book tells us he already has a theory about who that witch is or what that book is. And we kind of saw this starting to unfold in chapter 1 and 2. We're talking about someone who was, in terms of the masked person, we're talking about someone who was at a public festival selling a forbidden spell book about the very thing the pact was designed to suppress to a child. He was selling this to a child, or she was selling this to a child with no magical background whatsoever. That is not an accident. That is intent. Somebody wanted Coco to find that book. And I think as the story develops, we're going to find out that Coco's arrival at Keyfree's atelier was not as coincidental as it appears. Again, this is my theory. Or the masked man could have been just randomly giving it away to a child. We're yet to find that out. And this brings me to Keyfree's phone call. Of course, I did mention he had to get approval, from what it sounds like, to take Coco in. It's like getting her cleared. So that would not be unusual in a magical witch structure where an outsider is now having to be brought in. I've read novels from the West that had this similar type of setup. So it's not unusual for this to had to happen, that Keyfree had to get permission. These two chapters are a masterclass in what I would like to call setup. Every warm moment earns its emotional weight. Every mystery is planted without announcing itself. And the central question, who gets to decide what knowledge is dangerous and who is allowed to have it, is already alive in everything the story is building. Next, I will be covering chapters 3 and 4 in the next video. And if you think this setup is rich here, I'm guessing chapters 3 and 4 is going to reveal some more information that we can use, even if it's just relationship building amongst the characters. And of course, Coco's test that she has to go through. If you enjoyed this coverage of chapters 1 and 2 of Witch Hat Atelier, do not forget to like and subscribe, and please comment all you want. Let's talk, let's discuss Witch Hat Atelier before it airs in April. I'll meet you at the next Forbidden Spell book, and as usual, Keep talking manga with me. Thanks for listening in.